off, but you should definitely feel free to put questions in the chat, raise your hand, or even just unmute and start speaking up if you've come with questions or the conversation kind of gives you some more food for thought. So I'm going to let Maddox and Bellas introduce themselves and talk a little bit about kind of what they're passionate about and the Youth Catalyst team and the work that they're doing. So I'll pass to Maddox first if you want to introduce yourself.
Hey everyone, my name is Maddox. I use he, him, or they, them pronouns. I am located in New York City. I'm a consultant with Youth Collaboratory. And Youth Collaboratory does a lot of consulting work with different communities, evaluating and training, doing technical assistance. And that's something that I like to do, is evaluate systems, create change, and shift culture. So that's a little bit about me, and I'll pass it over to Bellis.
Hi everyone, my name is Bellis, pronounced as the bell is ringing. It's a weird name, so you're allowed to forget it and ask me how to pronounce it again. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm a newer member of the Youth Collaboratory team, but I would say that the Youth Collaboratory team works on improving and developing welfare programs on federal and state levels that help several groups of people. And I use my experience being a youth who ran away, and through federal and state programs, I was able to escape an abusive household. And now I'm here at YCT to make it easier for others to do the same.
Awesome. Wonderful. Thank you both again for joining us. We're really excited to have you, and I think we'll have a really wonderful conversation thinking about collaborating with youth and thinking about all the powerful work that folks are doing and ways that we can improve it, different insights you might have. So one of my first feeder questions that I'll kick things off with was kind of what advice would you give to a project that's still in the planning stage and is thinking about how to collaborate with youth in their community and to have authentic, relationships and engagement with youth in that planning space?
I can answer first if that's cool. I think what's helped me the most was this did take place. You're all good. I'm in my break room right now for my other job, but it's all good. It's not like anyone's going to, I don't know, have a wire on them or whatever. Let's see, what was I answering? What was the question again? I'm sorry.
No, of course. So what are some ways to collaborate with youth in the planning stage of a project? If you're just have an idea for a program or getting a program started, how can you collaborate in that space?
Before COVID-19, I would say by having the youth programs have like a game night, or my program used to have a life skills on every Tuesday where there would be free dinner. It would be like mac and cheese or pizza or whatever, but it would bring a bunch of people together, a bunch of people with shared life adversities, and we got to have conversations going that way.
Yeah, and I'll add to that, especially if something is in its planning stage or phase, looking at what is already working, or what, if there's anything in the community or your city or in other areas that you've seen of what's working, to kind of implement that into what's going on now. And I mean, for me, I always like to say that whenever you're doing something for any population or community, having the folks that are most impacted by that issue to be there, especially in the planning phase, so they can, shape something that will best serve their lives and their population and isn't just informed by people who aren't from that community.
So Maddox, one of the questions that you had suggested, I think, was to talk a little bit about how ways that folks could incorporate feedback culture from youth, who they're serving, who they're collaborating with. And can you talk a little bit more about what feedback culture is?
My mouse froze. Oh yeah, I think to what go to the comment that I just mentioned about always having folks. I mean, in this case, let's say youth, because this is who we're talking about, having youth at the forefront of the decisions that make their life. So, you know, bringing that from the planning, but also continuing that into the process and just creating that as a process and culture of feedback, because we know that a lot of times youth get feedback, right? Like, oh, you got to do this better. You got to behave better. You got to act a certain way, right? But a lot of time youth don't have the same, get the same autonomy or space to give feedback to the folks that are serving them, or the programs or the systems or institutions that they're serving with. So, you know, being mindful of that and having that culture of like feedback, like maybe we have, if it's in a drop-in, suggestion boxes in the drop-in, if it's in this case a mentoring space, really tailoring to the needs of the person, not like, well, I think for me, I went to college and I got a job here and I think that that's what you should do too. Like, well, there might be a youth that's an artist and might need support being an entrepreneur. So, you know, really tailor. That's why I say it's important to have youth in the space and the decisions, because they can inform the program. They can tell you what they need, and that will create a better relationship, right? Because they want to be there. They're going to want to be receiving services. They'll be excited. And I think you and the other end will feel good about seeing somebody feel good.
Mm-hmm. Bellis, did you have something to add to that?
Yeah, I did. I don't know if this is exactly where Maddox was going, but what I think the status quo right now is that so many subjects are taboo and stigmatized, like mental health issues, which RHY experience, or housing instability. Honestly, I feel like sometimes people still feel, I don't know, almost like a certain air of classism. Like if you don't have as much money as your peers, it's a little bit shameful. Like you don't want to hang out at your place, or you don't want people to see that. And I feel like what Maddox is advocating for would really just break that down, because instead of having shame being the go-to, the status quo, it would be replaced by, this is what I did, here's some suggestions, just like environment for open communication.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that. When I say that too, about is really having that as a culture of feedback, communication, and collaboration, so that it goes around, right? I think about it like an infinity loop, where it's not just like a straight line where one is receiving or taking. It's something that both entities engage with. So thinking it like that, and that goes with everything. Like I know we're talking about youth, but even in workspaces, you know, people on the ground don't get input, people in the office do. So kind of changing that all around.
Yeah, it's a better way of human interaction. It's to be open to that feedback, but also to open to giving it, and treating youth and teens and other humans like you would want to be treated, right? Cool. So you talked a little bit about collaboration. Can you expand on what a collaboration with the youth means to you from your point of view?
Yeah, I'll go. I don't know, Bella. I can start. And I say collaboration because I actually say that word intentionally, right? Because a lot of times, from what I've seen, sometimes when folks say they're collaborating with youth, they're not collaborating. Like sometimes they might be using youth to inform their ideas, their program, their content, but they're not teaching the youth, right? Like they're not also showing youth some valuable, tangible skills as well. And that's what I mean by collaboration, is knowing that this youth has something to input, but so do you, right? Like, and a lot of that will support, right, better than just thinking that, like relying on youth sometimes for that.
Got anything to add, Bellis?
Let's see. I would say that youth collaboration for me would be separate from like my position here at the Youth Collaboratory team. It would be like if the programs I work with sought out my opinion, and not only like very stagnant questions of like, I don't know, do you need more toothbrushes? I don't know, versus how would you better run life skills class, or what kind of group activities can we incorporate during life skills to get people together? Truly asking the youth questions that help develop programs and push them further, because I definitely know that through my experience, I've been not taken as seriously because I'm a younger person, while simultaneously also given managerial responsibilities. So that's what I think, treating youth as adults, fully capable, fully formed adults, is what I think youth collaboration is.
Cool, and that's good. I like the not taking you serious comment. Like, I think that'd be pretty dangerous to not take somebody serious. It also demonstrates a visible lack of respect, which then has a negative impact on the further collaboration, conversation, or whatever that's going along with it. Do you in the work that you're doing, because you're working, I mean, you're employed at Youth Collaboratory, can you talk a little bit about the work that you're doing, Bellis?
Yeah, I'm new, so I don't have the longest resume under YCT yet, but the last big project that I'm wrapping up is the adolescents pregnancy prevention webinar that's going to be next week. And I bring up that one because that one, I feel like my past experiences, I was able to help with developing that webinar best. We were just talking about how to prevent pregnancy while being an RHY, how to prevent the spread of STIs or STDs, how that looks for people of all genders and sexualities. And we also made a point to talk about what it's like being LGBT and RHY, because it is a slightly different experience depending on who you ask, slightly to a lot more severe. And I would say that what I do is I take my experiences and I don't know, I basically give my input of like, how can we prevent this from happening to someone else? Like, I've been on the ground, I know what it's like, and I know what could prevent it now that I'm not there anymore.
That's an interesting job description that you just kind of outlined, and I expect that it's fairly unique in some regards. But can you talk about how did you come to that kind of work? I mean, is it something that was decided for you, or was it you came to the table and talked about what it is that you were interested in working on?
So how I found this position is from continuously working with one specific program that's helped me escape that situation I brought up earlier. I continuously worked with them and I built a repertoire, and then YCT contacted them and said, we're looking for people who have experience being an RHY who can join this team. So that's how I was able to find this position. And then I read the work guide that we have and all these new opportunities, and I figure out which one do I like, which one like can I actually put myself in their shoes so I can actually like help as best as I can, because the RHY experience is so different based off of like where you are geographically, how old you are exactly, your sexuality, your gender. So yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, it does. Maddox, can you talk a little bit about what you do for the Catalyst team or the Collaboratory team?
Yeah, I also too, like Bella started this year. I'm working with Youth Collaboratory. Yeah, mostly been doing projects similar to Bella's, consulting on like doing webinars, things like that, on yeah, mostly issues that pertain to runaway and homeless youth and improving the like programs and service of runaway and homeless youth.
Yeah. So do either of you know very much about this initiative, the CIFAR initiative, that's what this meeting is all about? Because I can give you a little background before my next question.
Yeah. Stephanie, we had a meeting with Stephanie and someone else. I'm forgetting their name, which is
okay.
Suzanne.
Yes, thank you.
Mhm.
And yeah, they told us a little bit about it.
Sure.
What I mostly understood about it is that it's a mentorship program, which, you know, I I'm excited of the aspect, and I appreciate that, y'all are, hosting this for folks to figure out how to best make that possible. So that's always a good sign that, we're starting now.
So it's actually, they have grants out of the Department of Agriculture where they work with a certain population. So it could be early childhood, so they could be working with really little kids, or they could be working with middle schoolers or teens, or emerging adults, or full-grown adults, or even some projects are working with grandparents who are caring for their grandkids. And their requirement is that one of the basic requirements is that they work with is that the population has to be at a certain number or percentage of the folks have to be at poverty level or below. And so they're very vulnerable communities, they could be agricultural, they could be inner city, they could be up in the mountains, down in the valleys. There's programs in Flint, Michigan, working with young kids dealing with the lead water crisis. There's folks working on native communities in the middle of Montana, with STEM and GPS and whatnot. But if you were going to talk to one of these folks who's working with the little kids, the small children, and about collaboration and youth voice, because that's what I'm hearing a lot from you guys, is like, you got to bring your participants to the table, and you have to take them serious, and you have to hear their vision and get their input and help guide it, which really flows really well with our keynote speaker a couple days ago, where she was talking about really being a co-conspirator, not being an ally, but being a co-conspirator. And that really resonated with me. But if you were going to be a co-conspirator with somebody who's working with smaller kids, well, what kind of advice would you give to them about collaborating with those younger folks?
And when you say smaller kids, what age? Like under?
Sometimes they're third grade, second grade, preschool. Yeah. And their issue, the programs might be focused on nutrition or reading, or those are the two that come to my mind.
Yeah, I'm also really like, well, I don't know, impressed with, but like I'm curious about the USDA and their.
Well, I can explain that off the call. It's complicated, but
involvement with this. But yeah, I mean, one thing that comes to mind is one, my thing about feedback. I think that's something universal that could be used, right? Like when I say universal, any age, anywhere, any place, that could be applied, because I think even when you think about kids, like if you talk to kids, kids will tell you what they want or need, right? Like if you just give them the space and time, and if you respect them and treat them that way, right? I think especially with kids, you have to have boundaries with kids, but it's in a way of not coming in an authoritative way, right? Like in a, bossy, demeaning way, especially if you're serving kids, also because these vulnerable populations might have institutional trauma. So being aware of that, right? Like you have to come with a level of being, trauma informed or resiliency lens, and being careful and cautious. Like for me, I just think about the word love, right? Being patient, being loving, and again, like making the space for autonomy to hear from those folks, even 5-year-olds say, hey, like, what will benefit? You know what I mean? Like figure out the language, right? But talking to them in their language.
Yeah. And Shannon put in the chat about infantilizing children, that we worry that we infantilize older adults and even youth and teens, but making sure that we're thinking about how do we infantilize children as well.
Right. Another speaker that you met that was earlier, Jose talked about basically accepting people as they are, who they are in the as they're present to you, and I think that's true for younger kids as well. Hey, Bellis, did you have anything to add to what Maddox said?
Yes, I love this question, because my other job that I'm currently at is actually a child development lab, which is a fancy term for daycare. I have experience with this. So I would say infants to toddlers 0 to 3, they're very much preoccupied with relationships and feeling safe somewhere. And that can be very hard for a family where there's a certain percentage living at or below poverty. What I would recommend for that would be to do what you can to provide necessities to the family so that the parents aren't always away at work, aren't always emotionally abandoning their children. Let's see what else is there. Neglect is actually seen as a form of psychological abuse, even if it's completely unintentional. So that's a really big reason why I think it's important to provide what we can to those parents so that those toddlers aren't facing any long-term consequences for the short-term need. Ages 4 to 5, I haven't worked with preschoolers as often, but I genuinely think I don't talk to them as I would with my friends, obviously, but I don't talk down to them at all. I say like, hey dude, what's up? What did you do last weekend? Oh, I love your outfit, girlfriend. Is that a new haircut? Yeah, I feel like children are just young adults. They are adults in the making. And no matter what's going on during childhood development, you are teaching kids life skills. So it's always important to be informed and aware of what you're teaching them. Our instinct could be, oh, they're a child, let them enjoy their childhood, don't let them know about any of this bad stuff. But I believe that, thank you, they are adults in the making. They're fantastic. I love my job. I love this job too.
I think something that like and what you said made me think also about, you know, with a program like this, think about maybe for some of these folks this could be like an entry point to like some sort of support. So making that experience different, that it could be different than what people are usually expected of, you know, institutions, organizations, something to think about.
And going off of that, like if this is an organization that helps with families and could be present in a child's life for longer than just a few years or a few months, then that could be a great opportunity to break a stigma of not asking for help. I feel like older generations very much like, I don't take handouts or whatever. And yeah, like giving them a sense of autonomy, I feel like is what you give children when you let them know what's going on, but still know that you are a safe person or they have someone who is protecting them from the outside world. I believe I read this in the Journal of Pediatrics, but I could be wrong. But if you let children under the age of 3 know that you don't have your stuff together, it greatly increases their chances of having anxiety in the future. So I'm not
They can smell fear.
Yeah. They know that they're like out in the big old ocean with no floaty things. So
Yeah.
like, let's not do that, but also let's not hide them from everything. Let's give them an opportunity to learn how to cope with all this scary stuff and not be completely dependent on an adult who's always handling it.
Cool.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to interject here for the rest of the group if there's a question that you have. Otherwise, I'm going to keep going because I got lots of questions for these folks. So jump on in if you've got one. My next question is about youth mentoring. I'm going to switch gears on you guys a little bit. So many of these groups are working with middle schoolers, teens, and emerging adults. And some of their programs are focused on mentoring. Some of them are focused on like workforce prep, which is like getting folks ready to go out into the workforce, you know, and they have different approaches. It sounds a little similar to some of the things that you're doing. Some are focused on helping kids make the, you know, audiences that haven't traditionally gone to college to help them to see what that system looks like so that they're prepared to enter into it. So from your point of view, what makes a successful coaching or mentoring program? What has worked for you guys?
For me, I always think about my experience and how even like I am where I am here now. And for me, I think autonomy, right? Like again, like meeting people where they're at. So kind of assessing and listening to what are the needs that people have. So you could guide them and support them in that direction versus, you know, coming in with like a plan or an idea of what you think people want. And I say that because, yeah, like a lot of times for folks who are marginalized and go to programs to get back and receive support, there's like this very like idea of like, well, you have to go to work, which most oftentimes is like a retail or a corporate job, or you have to go to school, take a GED, and some people might not like that. Like for me, like I wasn't a person who saw myself doing something corporate or, and I didn't go to school, right? Like, I mean, I dropped out of high school. So, I knew what I wanted to do was in organizing and being in community spaces and being an advocate. And I found that support, although there was, the learning and I had to do the tests and things like that. I was still able to have the autonomy to have internships and opportunity that put me in the places of like what a career would be. So I would still get that career experience through an alternative way because I knew that the mainstream way doesn't work for me. So there's a lot of people like that. And for me, I always think about those people, right? It's very easy to make things for the masses, but like, let's think about those who fall behind the cracks. And those are the folks that, yeah, like maybe they need a little more inspiration, guidance, support. But once you are going through their direction, like you get that light, right? You get that action, that excitement that they might not had because you're making them happy in a way, right? You're giving them something to look, you're inspiring them to look up to something that those things could happen is not like out of reach. So definitely having autonomy in mind and figuring out like with the resources that you as a mentor have, how could you support that person in succeeding in what they, want to whatever best ability you could.
I really agree with that, Maddox. I like the point that you made and how you phrased it. Yeah, that's definitely super important to not tell youth, here's a list of what you have to do. And that list just happens to conveniently be the list you gave to every single other person. Yeah, like don't treat youth as cookie cutter, listen to their individual wants and needs. And kind of similar, I feel like what we need to recognize about mentoring is that I think especially for runaway homeless youth, it's a little bit more than just like a school counselor or whatever. Like I don't have the support from my parents. I don't really have a family. I'm just alone. But I still have a strong support system. I have really great friends. I have a therapist. I have several case managers, and I feel well supported even though it looks different. So I feel like that's what I would want programs helping RHY to understand, that this is a little bit more of an emotionally taxing role because it's a different, I guess it's like filling in a role that mentors don't typically fill in, if that makes sense.
I wanted to
Go ahead, Steph.
I wanted to ask about something you mentioned before, Bellis, about making sure that we're acknowledging the contributions that youth are making and kind of not taking advantage. And I'm wondering, in y'all's experience, like what are some good ways to value or to demonstrate you understand the immense contributions youth are making to your program? I know there's many different ways that can take place, but certainly I think a good conversation for everyone to have is acknowledging exactly what those contributions are and how large they can be for your program, and making sure that it isn't just a take relationship, that there is some value or something that you're contributing.
So the question is, where's the line between just taking and using me as a resource versus I'm an active participant?
I think that's part of it. So how do you walk that line? And then I think even going beyond the active participant, when does someone move from being an active participant to truly like you are a staff member, or you mentioned even taking on managerial tasks, and like what does that set of lines look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think times in my life when I was just used as a resource, it was literally I put in the work to improve something, not with the YCT. YCT's been amazing, but you know, like society treats youth a certain type of way. And examples of like me just being used as a resource is like, there was one time I worked in a nursing home and I swear I was cleaning the kitchen and checking the dining rooms more often than my manager was. Like, in fact, she would ask me to come in and like do extra cleaning hours because she knew that I would pay more attention to detail than her. So that was definitely an exploitative relationship. Being an active participant, I think, looks more so like we're all sitting at a round table and ping-ponging ideas off of each other, while a more leadership position, honestly, I feel like I have, even though I'm not in a leadership position at YCT, I feel more so in a leadership position than other positions I've held in the past, because when I offer my opinion or offer like my thought process for something, it's genuinely like not pushed aside, it's thought of. And even if it's like, okay, we got too much going on, let's put a pin in that. Leadership to me feels like I actually am leading, directing where things are going. Like back at the nursing home, I should have been directing where things were going and have more leadership, but they were just, yeah. If I need to phrase that better, let me know.
No, that's wonderful.
Thanks.
Okay. I don't know if Maddox, if you have something else you wanted to add on to that at all, or.
Yeah, I think like if you're doing something and like a systems thing, right? Like if you have like a youth space, having that one to show folks on that level that their input is being valued and also seeing change. And then on the other way, if you're asking stuff from youth, like compensating them in a way, right? Whether that's monetary, gift cards, modes of transportation, food, but making sure that folks do receive some sort of compensation for their input and for what they're contributing to the space. And that also makes me think of something that I wanted to mention earlier too, when Mark, I think you mentioned the different communities that this program could be in, and it could be anywhere. But thinking about, especially those folks who might be a little bit more rural, might be in like the mountains or places that are not a city metropolis area, like, and in these areas, this matters too, but just really thinking about those folks, like getting people's survival needs first, right? Like whatever, and resources people might need immediately to survive, right? Whether that's they might need a home, they might need food, they might need healthcare, but like trying to get those needs first bases met, because then the person will be able to perhaps show up to other areas of life. But for me, I'm a big believer that you first need to meet folks there with the survival needs before you could engage them to think critically on anything else. So just want to do that.
You just described Maslow's hierarchy of need, which is so cool. There's like this guy who did this research a long time ago, and that was the first thing, is like safety, basic needs are the primary thing. Before you can do anything else, you got to deal with that. So that's pretty cool, Maddox. So my job must be to shift gears, because as you guys are talking, I keep thinking, oh, you got something, Bellis?
Yes, thank you so much for letting me have a little bit of a tangent. It's not a tangent. Going off of Maslow's pyramid of needs, I forget where I read this too, but there is a research study done where there's a certain handful of teachers, and each teacher was told, oh my gosh, you're so lucky, you have this group of Einsteins in your class, it's only these 5 kids. And truth be told, they had average intelligence with the rest of their classmates. But once the teachers started acting like these kids had amazing potential, then they were able to achieve that potential. So I just wanted to highlight that literally psychology says we have to treat people that they're capable of their potential.
I love that, and I use that on my own kids, which is if you have high standards, they will reach to those
Mhm.
standards. If you have low standards, they will reach to those instead. So
The power of expectation.
yeah, expectations. So I was going to switch a little bit because this is kind of it's a cool opportunity for us because even though all of these folks that you see on your screen, they work with youth, they work with early child, they work with all these different audiences. One of the perennial struggles, one of the struggles all of us seem to have is recruitment. In particular, that's tough with middle schoolers and teens. Getting some heinies in seats or at the activity is difficult sometimes. Do you have words of advice or thoughts about what could improve our chances for recruitment? How do you get kids to come to programs, or teens or adults?
So what does the program look like? Is it an in-person or is it still Zoom?
Well, some of us we're in the middle of another big transition. We're starting to let people meet in person, but we're all over the place. So our institutions tell us what we can and can't do. But in an in-person environment, what are the things that would get a young person to come to the program?
I would say incentives for the audience, the targeted audience. Like what got a lot of people to life skills wasn't even necessarily like every Tuesday you get to learn a life skill. That sounds good enough, right? Like free life lessons that your parents didn't teach you. But what got most people to come over was the free dinner. So yeah.
Always food.
Yeah, food's a great incentive. So perhaps something as simple as that. I think if I were in your position, I would start off by like putting flyers up in the local areas where teens and middle schoolers might meet, things with like headlines saying like, do you relate to this, or blah, 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 blah. Does this apply to you? Then take, like, how those papers will say like, take this phone number or whatever.
Yeah.
That way, like, I feel like it will grab people's attention. They'll be able to take it with them. And if there's a further like instant gratification of, oh, free food, that's where I would start.
Cool.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, incentives to get folks into the space. And yeah, I mean, I know I just keep thinking back to like maybe like some of the most rural areas this might not apply to, or maybe it could, but I think word of mouth helps. If there's some program or something like that folks have seen before, like using those folks to say, oh, tell other people, right? Like in New York, a lot of like folks get into a lot of spaces like that by word of mouth, people receiving services, any type of outreach material, like if there's like a video talking about what the space is like, something like that, so people could kind of get a visual or a vibe of how it might be, and maybe that can get them in the space. And I agree with Bellis, like the same way that we market for shows and all kinds of stuff, like we should also be marketing social services like that as well, so people can know about the resources in their cities and counties, locations.
Cool. We had another presentation again earlier where one of our sites, the teens in the program, put together a YouTube video that then they sent out. So it's kind of like what you were talking about, Maddox, with word of mouth. It was in their own words to try to help other folks. It wasn't so much to recruit, but it was to basically tell them to stay home right at the beginning of COVID because people were thinking they could still live their lives. Well, those are all my questions. Is there anything that you think that we didn't ask that you think we just need to know?
I think there's no additional information. If anything, I would just like to highlight some of the key points of like, make sure you're listening to youth and taking their advice, giving them leadership opportunities. Make sure you are appreciating their work when they do put in work, and treat all humans like they are intelligent no matter what their age is.
Good advice.
Yeah, right on. I agree with Bella. It's just, yeah, I think everything we touched on the foundation. So I feel like taking that advice and at least taking one thing and implementing it into just space. Oh, one quick thing that came to me is like visuals. You know, having maybe some like representations of different communities in the spaces, right? Like, you know, maybe some like LGBTQ stuff, right? So maybe folks in that community could feel comfortable, and yeah, maybe images and photos of the folks you're serving in the space too.
Make sure that it reflects the audience, right?
Yeah.
And the real audience, not just the one that we think it looks like. Well, I'm gonna ask you two to stay in the room, but the rest of the folks, I think we're wrapping up, right, Steph?
Yeah, so we've got our closing session. I'm going to put a link to it in the chat, but I know folks are mentioning in the chat, kind of thanks for sharing. Thank you both for being here. And I just want to echo that. We really appreciate you both coming and sharing your thoughts and your wisdom with us. And we really appreciate it.
All right. Well, and I want to say thanks. It's been a pleasure for me to talk to both of you as well.